Hi, Mike King, realnewsandhistory.com. And the title of today's episode is The Long Marxist March Through the Universities. And this will help you understand how the educational system in this country was captured and corrupted and how we ended up in this mess. And this is based on a recent anti-New York Times article which I wrote, which itself was based on an old article that I pulled out of the archives, June 23rd, 1968, about the SDS. The headline is The Secretive SDS, that's Students for a Democratic Society. Okay? So let's get started here. Make sure you hit that like button before we go any further so we can get this video moving up the algorithms here. So there's an image. This was on from the 1968 New York Times. It shows, the hippie mob there, SDS, having some sort of protest here. I want to call your attention to that logo. There's the logo of the SDS. It's in red, and it's a fist, raised fists and flags, very, very similar to the Antifa flag of today, because it's essentially the same. It's the same crowd. It's a generational problem here. And so the subheadline of that New York Times article reads, during last week's national convention of the Students for Democratic Society in Michigan, tight security rules barred the press from some meetings. So the New York Times was butthurt because these communists wouldn't allow the reporters in to see. These are the same people who talk about freedom of the press. They didn't want any reporters. They're even too extreme for the New York Times, the SDS. All right, I begin my article with, it has often been said that Rome was not built in a day. True indeed, and neither was Rome nor its various offspring, which we collectively refer to as Western civilization, torn down in a day either. It was a decades-long process which started with the Jewish intellectuals of the Frankfurt School, a cancer which spread to the elite universities of the United States after the great one, that's Hitler for all you newbies and normies, rose to power and disinfected Germany of its dangerous doctrine known as critical theory. So that's what happened. This isn't after World War II. This is after Hitler comes to power in 1933, puts all this commie and Marxist scum out of business. Where did they go? They come here. Well, some of them went to the UK, but many of them came to the United States. And the disease, which Hitler had cleansed Germany of, it came over here instead. I mean, it was already over here, but now their numbers were reinforced, and a lot of them ended up at elite colleges spreading their Marxist cancer. That's what the Frankfurt School was all about. We'll talk a little bit more about them later. By the date of today's selected historical article from 1968, the first legions of academic subversives had already been trained and groomed for the purpose of penetrating the key institutions in what they themselves referred to as, quote, the long march through the institutions. The article describing the Students for a Democratic Society describes the organization as radical left. And when the New York Times, aka the paper of record, tags a group as radical left, you can imagine just how bad they must have been. This is from the article, subheadline, the SDS, a new radical group, claims 35,000 members in chapters on 300 campuses. And by 1970, the SDS had an estimated 100,000 members. And its rapid growth from just 1,000 members in 1962 was a clear indication of a deep state planned, financed, and executed project. How did this organization grow so rapidly on the university campuses from 1,000 members to 100,000 in just, 8 years? Hardcore lefties. Some of these people, grew up and became normal Americans, but a lot of them, They penetrated the institutions. These were the hippies of the day, communist hippies. But, later on, they penetrated, journalism and the professions and even government. I'll show you some images here. Here they are, usually, protesting everything from civil rights for the environment, the Vietnam War. But there was a violent element to them as well, like the Communist Weather Underground that grew out of this, and they start planting bombs. People like Bill Ayers, Obama's mentor, who groomed the young Obama. So it had a violent element to it as well. So clearly this was a CIA operation, because they cultivated the far left, in this country. So where'd they get all their money, all their organization from? How did they grow so rapidly? The shouted slogans and banners of the Jewish-led SDS, their leaders were all leftist Jews, were Marxists. Elements of this campus commie movement hijacked the anti-war and civil rights efforts of that era, eventually turning violently anti-American, anti-Christian, and anti-white. So that was a marketing tactic. They would take like a legitimate concern, such as opposition to the war in Vietnam, the senseless war in Vietnam, and they suck people in that way, civil rights, environment. And then you start grooming them, and then you turn them from, legitimate anti-war or anti-racism into straight out anti-America, anti-God, anti-tradition. This is the whole, that's the whole template here. It's been replayed many times. This goes back to 19th century Europe. They always go after the students because they're young and stupid. They think they're smart, but they're stupid. So they're easily malleable. All right, so that's what SDS is all about. In later years before his death, an early leader of the SDS named Todd Gitlin, Jewish communist, gloated about achieving today's political correctness, now often referred to as wokeism. So this is only a few years ago before he died. This is what he himself writes and admits. He's happy with his lifetime accomplishment here. But he writes, "My generation of the new left relinquished any title to patriotism without much sense of loss. All that was left to the left was to unearth righteous traditions and cultivate them in the universities." So he's admitting to being a Frankfurt School subversive here. Uproot the traditions. This is him still talking, the much mocked political correctness of the next academic generations was a consolation prize. We lost, we squandered the politics, but we won the textbooks. And that's exactly true. They didn't get their communist revolution. America was still way too strong to be overthrown by any kind of, violent Bolshevik-style revolution. And he admits that. Yeah, we lost the politics at that time, but we won the textbooks, which means they won the future. And he's gloating about it. Okay? So we did have a revolution in this country, but it was the long march through the universities, which is a term that they coined, the commie Marxists. They openly spoke about the long march. And that's how they did it. All right, return to my writing. Now, Todd Gitlin was a God-hating, white-hating, America-hating scumbag of the lowest order. What he described was the gradualistic success of the left's Frankfurt School strategy known as the Long March Through the Institutions. Actually, I think it was a commie strategist named Antonio Gramsci who might have coined that term, but they've long used it or a variation thereof. Saul Alinsky, Marxist strategist in the 60s, a guru to Hillary Clinton. Basically, what he said back then is, cut your hair, put on a suit, and penetrate. And that's what a lot of the hippies did. Okay, so they dropped the radical facade in order to seem like normal people, but they remained communist, America-hating radicals in their core. They just had to take the gradual approach. So, when instant revolution is not possible, the Frankfurt critical theorists pursue gradual Marxist evolution. That term sounds familiar. More recently, we heard critical race theory. That's what it means, critical theory. And that's what Frankfurt School is all about. They develop critical theory. Critical of what? Critical of everything. All of the institutions and traditions of society, you critique them and you tear them down just for the sake of critiquing them. And that's how you loosen a society from its roots, its moorings, and you make them ripe to believe in nothing. And then you control them. You see? You reduce people to rootless nothings. That's what critical theory is all about. Of course, that's only for the Goyim, not for them. They keep their peoples and traditions intact. Okay, continue. The SDS eventually splintered due to rival factionalism, with one faction, the Weathermen, for example, going full-blown terrorists. They started blowing up shit and killing people. It was wild, late 60s, early 70s. You know, Weather Underground, your Black Panthers. Okay, and then there's another faction in that category I would place like Bill and Hillary Clinton. If you ever saw Bill and Hillary Clinton when they were in college, it was dirty scumbag, long-haired hippies. Okay, and then they clean up and act like normal people so they could run for office. But Bill and Hillary Clinton would definitely fit that category. They became, quote, long marchers. So one can only imagine how many of that Red Army of intellectuals, many from wealthy, well-connected families and elite universities, went on to shed their slob image and quietly blend and rise into the key institutions, all while maintaining their radical activism and seething hatred for all things normal, natural, and beautiful. That's what the Frankfurt School is all about. And here they are. Here's a picture from Germany, just before Hitler came to power. The Frankfurt School of Intellectuals, they call themselves. Okay? All they knew how to do is just criticize everything, whether it's, gender roles or traditional, economic, whatever. Just criticize it, tear it down, and confuse young people, fuck them up in the head, make little commies out of them. That's what the Frankfurt School intellectuals were all about. But they put like an intellectual veneer on their analysis, you see. They're phonies. They're pseudo-intellectuals. They're just communist, Jewish subversives. And when Hitler came to power, they were out of business, okay, along with the Institute for Sexology and all of that crap. So where do they go? Some go to Britain. A lot of them came to the United States. But the Frankfurt School intellectuals, many of them ended up at Columbia University in New York. And that's important because that's where the famous Teachers College is. So you influence the teachers, the leaders of the teachers, and then you influence the curriculums. First with the universities, then it trickulates down to high schools, middle schools, and today, what do they teach the kids? The LGBT, the climate change, all that garbage. But that's how they did. But a lot of them were welcomed at Columbia University Teachers College, the Frankfurt School. Here's Todd Gitlin. In one image, you see him as a young hippie, SDS. And then there's an older Todd Gitlin who reflects upon his achievement. He's satisfied. We didn't win the politics back then, but we won the textbooks. That's your long march. Okay? I'll continue with my article here. Just as the buttoned-up, normal-looking early SDS eventually spawned the outwardly radical, drugged-up hippies, there was an earlier stage of the Long March during the post-war years in the 1950s. You see, since the days of the French Revolution, the students have always been and will always be nothing more than stupid, malleable clumps of raw material. They love going after the students because, your college students, they're just smart enough that they know a thing or two. So They develop their egos and they're going to be the leaders of the futures. But because they're so young, they lack wisdom. So it's a perfect combination. You're getting the leaders of tomorrow, but you're getting them at a time when they're still stupid because you're young. I don't care what your IQ is or your SAT score is when you're 19, 20, 21 years. What do you know? You know shit, but you think you know everything. So that's perfect for them. They always go after the students because they lack wisdom, yet they still have intelligence, and they're going to be the leaders in the professions of tomorrow, you see? And this goes back to the French Revolution. They always went after the students, and they puffed them up. You're the future. You're the best and the brightest. You're the gifted and the talented. That's how they do the manipulation. Before the usual suspects could fry the minds and pollute the souls of their starstruck students, they had to capture the top spots at the elite universities. Once inside the ivy walls of the college towns, the NWO's hand-picked presidents then lowered the drawbridge and allowed the Marxist professors to invade. With these operatives placed in the key spots, the radicalization of the next generation of leaders could commence and, over the course of time, spread like a commie cancer, both outwardly into society and also downward into the high schools and elementary schools. So before you can corrupt the students, you've got to get your commie professors in there. And in order to do that, you've got to capture the administrative positions at the top, university presidents. Okay? See the process? You get your presidents in there, and then the presidents get the commie professors in there, and then the commie professors corrupt the students. So it's not done overnight. Now understand that during this era of conservative appearance, influential men closely associated with the mass-murdering globalist traitor Dwight D. Eisenhower, total scumbag. Read my book, I Don't Like Ike. It's also part of the PDF package in the description box below. Served as university presidents. Under the reign of each of these traitors, the important universities which they oversaw eagerly gobbled up UNESCO material and let the radical professors in to establish or enhance the Bolshevik beachhead. So that's how it started. They got the university presidents in there first, and it really started to gain momentum during the presidency of Dwight D. Eisenhower. And who would have thought it? Because it's the 50s. It's a conservative era. And you see people like Eisenhower and these other university presidents. They seem like real, serious, well-adjusted men. But no, this was the globalist onslaught. This is where it really begins. After World War II, they established UNESCO, the United States Education, Science, Cultural Organization. Now, there's three men in particular here I want to focus on because they're so tightly connected. The three men. Eisenhower himself, he was made president at Columbia University. He was given a no-show job concurrent with being the first commander of NATO. That was just to enhance his academic credentials. But it's Columbia, the same university with all these Frankfurt School people. And while he was president, even though it was no show, more commies started coming into Columbia University. Now, Eisenhower had a brother, Milton Eisenhower, total commie pinko, one world, open one worlder, wrote articles about, United Nations should be more powerful than any nation on earth. And he was Eisenhower's most trusted advisor, very close to his brother, Milton Eisenhower. Well, at varying times, Milton Eisenhower, who was a career academic, served as president. Well, he also served in the FDR administration in the communist-infested Labor Department. But at varying times, he served as president at Kansas State, Penn State, and Johns Hopkins of the COVID hoax fame. Remember Johns Hopkins? They were the ones putting out those scary death charts. So everybody who died of flu or pneumonia or gunshot or motorcycle accident, they were classified as COVID, and Johns Hopkins was putting out the death charts on CNN. So he was president of three different universities at different times. And then there was Eisenhower's one of his main speechwriter, a globalist named Malcolm Moose, had been president of Minnesota, University of Minnesota. was also at the Carnegie Foundation. So you got all these high-level academics associated with Eisenhower, and at every university they went to, they brought the UNESCO garbage in, okay, and start teaching the students about the one world, and this is going to be your next generation. So back then, very few people would have believed or could have foreseen that such respectable and patriotic-seeming individuals were deliberately laying the Long March groundwork for the countercultural SDS hippiedom of the 1960s and the critical race theory of today. But that is exactly what they and many other suit-wearing, conservative-appearing college presidents did. And oh, what a march it has been. And so this is how it started. You really don't see anything too radical in this picture, do you? Well, that's Milton Eisenhower at Penn State with his students. And you see the sign in the back, UNESCO. And these are all the books recommended by UNESCO. So he's screwing up the curriculum with the commie propaganda. And you look at those students, they're wearing normal shirts, normal skirts. Everything seems like normal and relatively conservative. But this is the seeds, okay? And the rotten fruit would not be manifest until the late 60s and 70s with your SDS. But this is the beginning right here. This is how cabal operated. There's another one. Now there's Malcolm Moose. And he's the one who wrote the famous military-industrial complex speech, which is really just a warning about the military could one day rise up and stop the New World Order. That's the real meaning of that speech. And there's my book, I Don't Like Ike Eisenhower. So Eisenhower, you had 8 years of the Eisenhower presidency, and everyone just thought everything was cool in America. It was a conservative Christian country, and it was. But that was just a facade. Because behind the scenes, Eisenhower and this clique here, they were basically setting up the foundation in the universities to enable the Long March, and then later on the SDS, and now we have this mess that we're in. It's going to take a long time to clean up. The good news, I hope, the positive news, is the Q operation is aware of this. And things are changing at the university, but it's a lot of damage is going to have to be undone. I mean, Donald Trump himself said our universities are turning our students into communists. Okay, so let's hope that after this storm passes, they've got a really good rehabilitation program. Because even with all of this commie cabal being put out of business, a lot of this shit is like already on automatic. You see, it's got to be cleaned out. So Rome wasn't built in a day, it wasn't destroyed in a day, and it may not be resurrected in a day either. A lot of damage these long marchers did, starting with the Frankfurt School. Okay, so now you know. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If so, have a look at the links below. Buy me a cup of coffee from time to time so I can make more videos and advertise them. If you don't have it yet, make sure you get the $29 PDF package, all 35 of my books in PDF format for just $29. If you prefer the physical books, my Amazon page is linked below. You definitely want to get books like this. Crash Course NWO, you can read this in an hour. That's available at Amazon. It's the whole 250-year history of the cabal. Actually, it goes back even further than that. But I start with the Illuminati. Here's the secret plan to save humanity. Summary of the Q operation and the rise of Commander Trump. Crash Course 9/11 Inside Job. You just go through my Amazon page. You'll find these books fascinating. Very easy to read, clear, and concise. And as always, I appreciate your support. So that's all I got for today. I'll be back real soon with another video. Thank you.